So, a response to you stupid morons' incessant rantings about the idiocy of people who believe in crop circles being made by aliens or some other agency. My response is basically about how a particular crop circle that I saw, which was a one in oilseed rape. When I found the crop circle, it was quite a new circle. I don't think many people, if any, had been in it, but I went and looked at the edge of the circle, since people generally don't walk around the edge of the circle, they walk a few, a short way inside the circle. And I could be pretty sure that nobody had trampled on those particular stalks. And I found some stalks that were partially bent over, as you often do at the edge of the circle, and some stalks that were completely bent over but right up against the standing crop, and I examined those quite closely. And what I was able to see was that the bending in the crop circle was all concentrated in the first 15 to 20 centimetres of the stem from the point where it left, emerged from the ground. And then the rest of the stalk was really quite straight. There was hardly any bending in it. All the bending appeared to be certainly concentrated in the growth nodes, and where it actually came out of the ground, it was quite bent as well. The bending was very, very concentrated, so it wasn't like spread out across the length of the crop, the stalk. It was all very, very near the point where it came out of the ground, and there were no marks on the stalk. I looked very carefully to that, and I couldn't see any sort of crush marks or marks that you get if it had been pushed down. And indeed, it would have been quite difficult to just push that individual stalk down. But that aside, there were no crush marks or other physical damage on the surface of on the upper surface of the oilseed rape stalk. So I thought, well, I'll try and reproduce that in the manner alleged by people like you, stupid moron. So I got a stalk that was upright and not being hadn't been moved or disturbed as part of the standing crop, and I pushed it at about 20 centimetres or so above the point where it left the ground, and I pushed it over into a sort of a flat position in about sort of 5 seconds. I didn't just shove it, I pushed it reasonably quickly, and the sort of speed range that I would imagine somebody who's trying to make a crop circle with a piece of wood tied to their foot would push it over in. You can't take it all day, rip on the end, and you couldn't do it instantly. Otherwise, the stalks would break. Anyway, what was quite interesting was that the stalk, I think all the stalks I tried either broke at a point near the root system, or they pulled the root system up out of the ground, and so yes, it bent over, but it was clearly been pushed over. The ones that I looked at that had been pushed over, that were or bent over, that were part of the circle, didn't display this at all. They were fully rooted in the ground. The bending was all very, very close to the point where they left the ground, however. As I said, there was no damage to it, and the bending appeared to be at the node. So that scenario certainly could not be created by pushing the stalk over in a period of 5 seconds or so, or the sort of time frame that you would use if you've got a piece of wood on your foot. It's simply they either uprooted themselves or they broke. So I thought, well, I'll try it a different way. I'll try and increase the length of time that it takes to bend the thing over. They've got a reasonably strong root structure, oilseed rape. So I pushed about the same sort of point, maybe a little bit higher this time, about maybe 25 centimetres. And I gradually increased the pressure, very gradually, and the thing started to bend. I didn't want to push too fast, otherwise that would cause it to uproot or possibly break, as the other ones had done. And I did actually succeed in getting the oilseed rape to assume a position kind of approximately equating to the position of the stalks that were part of the circle. However, the difference was that the bending was distributed along a much greater length of the stem and was not concentrated in the nodes. It also led to a certain degree of sort of cracking in the stem near the point of maximum bending, which tended to be near the ground. But the overall bend was a very gradual bend, and it didn't exhibit this kind of almost exponential, I would say, or reverse exponential bending that you got in the stem that was part of the crop circle. The part of the stem that was part of the crop circle exhibited the greatest amount of bend closest to the earth, and then the bending amount, or the degree of bending per unit length, rapidly fell off to the point where it was then straight and just lying on the ground. Whereas the sample that I did, the bending was distributed from the point where I was actually applying the pressure, or just below that, in an even way across the length of the stem going into the ground. And when you compare the two visually, it was quite obvious that they were not the same. They weren't created by the same means. But what was interesting is it took an incredibly long time to achieve that result, and working on a single stem, it took me, I'm recollecting, this was some while ago that I did this, it was something like about a minute, longer than a minute. It was an incredibly long period of time, and then that was the process was particularly focused on that one stalk, so the forces and the rate of bending could be really precisely applied, and you simply could not do that with a piece of wood. It's ludicrous to imagine that you could. The time taken to do this would be ridiculously long. But not only that, I don't think you could actually apply it on an individual stalk by stalk basis, simply because you can't get down to that level if you're using a piece of wood on the end of your foot or some other mechanical means. Now, I'm not saying that these crop circles are made by aliens or I have no idea what they're made by, but what I do think is definitely the case is they're not made by people like my stupid moron, or if they are, they're the very amateurish ones that are quite easily distinguishable from what one might term a genuine, unknown means crop circle. And I use that term carefully because I don't want to say that they're made by aliens, although I think they may be made by some non-human agency, but the jury's out on that. I can foresee scenarios where these things are made by humans, but they would require some form of energy device, I would say, or at least some kind of chemical with very advanced properties to interfere with the way the cellular growth mechanism works and cause differential growth rates on one side of the plant to the other, and all sorts of things like that. But so you could posit the idea of somebody in a satellite with a microwave generator, and an extremely tightly focused beam and a gobo or a kind of a silhouette type thing, and you could project that on the ground and it would create some kind of effect. That's kind of things you could, or you could posit something where somebody's got 3 or 4 projectors and they all create some kind of interference pattern or focus by combining the energies in a sort of beat frequency sort of way, so that you actually get a manifestation of a particular energy at that point in space, creating some effect. That's another scenario. But other than that, who knows what made them? But I don't think it's people like you, stupid moron. The jury is definitely out on that. And what puzzles me is why people like him are so determined to rubbish the thing. I was involved in crop circle research or interest in very, very early days when they first appeared, and there were a couple of dudes there who were very bizarre people who then went on to form the Crop Circle Alliance, or the Crop Circle Makers. They had some website up there, and it was around that time that Doug and Dave suddenly came out and said it was us that did it all. But I think that's just the classic disinformation scam, really. You present something that's plausible that a large number of people believe, and then after that everybody just says, oh yeah, it was Doug and Dave, wasn't it? And they just ignore it, which is what is also puzzling about My Stupid Moron. The papers and people are really not interested in crop circles anymore. So why is he so passionately, determined to rubbish it? Is it because, he has some hidden agenda? I don't know, but it's certainly very bizarre to me. Maybe somebody else has got an interesting take on it. That's all.